Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the third quarterly preparatory meeting for the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review of 2025. La traduction est disponible en anglais et en français. Si vous êtes en ligne, veuillez sélectionner votre langue préférée en utilisant le bouton Interprétation sur Zoom. I would now like to briefly introduce our panelists and go over the briefing agenda. So we will start with His Excellency Ambassador Julien Tony, Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations Office in Geneva, who will deliver the opening remarks, followed by myself. We will then have Mr. Nicolas Bras, who's our Senior Policy Advisor and Head of the Global Compact on Refugees Coordination Team in UNHCR, who's extremely well known to you, who will share updates on the roadmap to the GRF Progress Review and notably on the program for the event. After Mr. Brass's remarks, Ambassador Tony will moderate the session. And in order to accommodate as many interventions as possible, we will not have presentations, but we'll open the floor directly. And as per the usual practice, we will follow the GCR spirit in terms of accommodating interventions first by the states and then by other stakeholders. And we look forward to hearing your feedback on the preparations and program for the GRF Progress Review, and also to hear your pledge updates. Today's discussions and subsequent preparatory meetings will serve to inform the development of the GRF Progress Review program. At the end of the discussion, I will deliver a few closing remarks before adjourning the meeting. And of course, also joining us on the podium is Ms. Anne Kerr, who's head of HCR's governance service, also extremely well known to you, who is supporting us as secretary for the briefing. With that, I would now like to invite Ambassador Tony to give his introductory remarks. Over to you, Ambassador.
Bonjour, Madame la Haut-Commissaire, assistante en charge de la protection, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues et chers participants, chères participantes. La Suisse est honorée en tant qu'État co-hôte de prendre la parole à l'occasion de cette avant-dernière réunion préparatoire en vue de la réunion sur les progrès du Forum mondial sur les réfugiés. Depuis l'adoption du Pacte mondial sur les réfugiés en 2018, nous avons franchi d'importantes étapes, mais les défis n'ont cessé de croître. Les conflits armés, la violence et les effets du changement climatique continuent d'alimenter des déplacements forcés sans précédent. Plus de 120 millions de personnes ont été contraintes de fuir leur foyer en 2024. C'est une réalité qui nous rappelle avec force que nul État ne peut ni ne doit faire face seul à de tels défis. Elle résonne d'autant plus fortement dans un contexte de désengagement financier qui accroît la pression sur les principaux États hôtes, dont près de 75% se trouvent être des pays à revenus faibles ou intermédiaires. Le processus du GRF constitue dans ce contexte un moment essentiel pour évaluer nos engagements, renforcer notre solidarité et réaffirmer la pertinence du multilatéralisme. La réunion de décembre ne doit pas être perçue uniquement comme un exercice visant à tirer un bilan. Elle doit aussi raviver la dynamique collective née à Genève en 2019 et confirmée en 2023, en renforçant l'esprit de responsabilité partagée et d'action commune. Nous devons ancrer les plus de 3400 engagements individuels et 47 engagements multipartites déjà formulés dans une logique de suivi concret afin qu'ils produisent des effets tangibles pour les réfugiés et les communautés qui les accueillent. La Suisse salue tout particulièrement la participation active et significative des réfugiés eux-mêmes, qui ne sont plus seulement des bénéficiaires, mais aussi de véritables acteurs de solutions. Nous sommes heureux de pouvoir soutenir leur venue à Genève, convaincus que leur voix est indispensable à la légitimité et à la pertinence du processus. Mesdames et messieurs, en tant que co-hôte, la Suisse se réjouit d'accueillir en décembre un large éventail de parties prenantes, États, agences des Nations Unies, acteurs humanitaires et du développement, autorités locales, secteur privé, société civile et bien sûr les réfugiés. C'est ce tissu multilatéral, inclusif et diversifié qui incarne le véritable esprit du pacte mondial. À l'approche de la réunion, nous appelons tous les États et partenaires à rehausser le niveau de leurs engagements. Le succès de la réunion sur les progrès du Forum mondial dépendra de la qualité, de la pertinence et du caractère concret des promesses qui seront formulées. La Suisse continuera pour sa part à s'investir dans ces domaines prioritaires: la protection, les solutions durables, l'action climatique, la mobilisation de ressources financières durables et de qualité, ainsi que la localisation, notamment par l'implication des villes et des collectivités locales. Mesdames et messieurs, les 3 prochains mois seront décisifs. Ils doivent être mis à profit pour consolider nos synergies, défendre le système multilatéral et surtout redonner espoir à celles et ceux qui en ont le plus besoin. Genève sera prête à accueillir la communauté internationale, fidèle à sa tradition d'ouverture et d'engagement en faveur des plus vulnérables. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Ambassador. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today marks exactly 90 days before we gather again on the 15th of December here in Geneva to take stock of progress, achievements, challenges, and opportunities in our collective efforts to implement the Global Compact on Refugees. The GRF Progress Review will not be business as usual. It comes at a time when the global landscape is marked by a record level of forcible displacement, unprecedented geopolitical crises, and severe financial constraints. It will be a pivotal moment to measure results, renew commitments, and demonstrate that the compact, although not legally binding, has become the truest blueprint for multilateralism and solidarity in action, as evidenced by, as the ambassador has pointed out, the 3,400 individual pledges and 47 multi-stakeholder pledges, which emerged from the GRF process. Even in the current challenging environment, the spirit of international solidarity anchored in the compact continues to inspire concrete action locally, regionally, and globally, further demonstrated by the stock-taking exercises supported and convened by many of those in the room here today. Allow me just to share a few examples of the very positive progress noted from the recent stock-taking exercises. At least 9 states have made significant progress towards adopting and strengthening laws and policies supporting economic inclusion and social protection of refugees. Close to 350,000 displaced people have already been reached by either private sector, civil society, and other entities, providing skills development and jobs. Around 17 countries are at various stages of implementing and establishing community sponsorship programs to welcome refugees and to help them integrate into communities. Some 10 countries are making positive progress with machine-readable travel documents, facilitating access to protection and solutions. Regarding asylum capacity, 7 concrete pledge matches are now in place, including France with Chad and Niger, the EU Asylum Agency with Niger, Denmark with Kenya, and many others. Of course, the regional support platforms such as IGAD, MIRPS, the SSAR, and CAR continue to facilitate and encourage regional cooperation for greater solidarity and responsibility sharing in matters of protection, inclusion, and solutions. The recently established Chile Plan of Action follow-up and coordination mechanism with 15 regional priorities to be implemented between 2025 and 2027 is one tangible example of this progress. Good strides are also being made on meaningful refugee participation, as the ambassador noted. For example, refugee-led organizations are integral participants in the MIRPS civil society dialogue mechanism. And the presidency of this mechanism is held by the Asociación de Nicaragüense en Mexico, led by refugees. I apologize for my terrible Spanish pronunciation there. Encouraging as these developments are, however, we recognize that challenges persist, and this is why the GRF Progress Review is so timely. As the official midway point between global refugee fora, while the meeting will take stock of progress, trends, and challenges, it also serves as an opportunity to renew unity, mobilize further support, and demonstrate that the compact, affirmed 7 years ago, continues to deliver. Pledge matching, for example, will remain at the core of this effort, and Nicolas will elaborate further on this shortly. Meaningful refugee participation, as noted, is another critical priority under the compact that also remains central to the event in December. The tentative program that will be presented today has been informed by recommendations from extensive consultations held with over 60 organizations led by forcibly displaced and stateless persons, as well as individual refugee and stateless leaders. We extend our appreciation to the support that many of you are providing to ensure that we reach our target of ensuring that 10% of the participation in the meeting will consist of refugees and stateless persons. But I also take this opportunity to call on all stakeholders to engage refugees and their organizations in the stock-taking process, informing the December meeting, and to include refugee advisors in their delegations to the December event, and to involve them meaningfully. UNHCR has issued a guidance note to this end, which will be shared in the summary of this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, let us use today's discussion and the months to come to help ensure that the GRF Progress Review is impactful, forward-looking, and a moment of recommitment. Thank you. I now hand the floor to Mr. Brass for the presentation. Over to you, Nicolas.
Thank you, Assistant High Commissioner. Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Colleagues, I have a few slides, and I will kindly ask the team to help me go through them. Let me start with perhaps the timeline that you are, I'm sure, all familiar with by now. Just to realize that we are indeed 90 days before the event, so we don't have that much time before the event. We have done good progress in terms of stock-taking consultations, and indeed Ruven has just elaborated on a few examples of the findings, and I will provide a few more examples as well in a minute. And we're extremely thankful to all of you in the room and online for your continued engagement and your leadership in convening some of those consultations, some of those stock-taking moments. A few more are still planned this month and in October as well. And as you know, we had to be a bit more flexible compared to the initial timeline that we had set to ourselves, considering the challenging environment and in particular funding constraints that we all have been facing this year. But just two important points on this slide. We will have a number of opportunities to engage between now and the GRF Progress Review, besides, of course, this preparatory meeting and the fourth one held in November, which will be focused on the logistics of the event, as well as will be used as an opportunity to launch the GCR, the Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report. We will also have in October, in the margins of UNHCR Executive Committee, a side event which will be dedicated to the preparations of the GRF Progress Review, focusing on the findings of the stock taking. So we look forward to your engagement and support in this event. And last but not the least, of course, there's a series of global policy fora, starting with the UN General Assembly, which will give you, more than UNHCR, perhaps an opportunity also to engage and really reiterate support towards the objective and the commitments made at the Global Refugee Forum and under the Global Compact. Next slide. Also, allow me to use today's meeting to give you a very quick update on pledge implementation. You are also familiar with this visual by now, I assume. The ambassador referred to the over 3,400 pledges that have been made since 2019. Good progress has been reported, and it's very important we continue capturing the information, including the challenges that you are all facing when it comes to implementing those pledges. But we remain very encouraged in the level of engagement and information shared to date. There have been over 1,400 updates shared over the past year, and we don't take those things for granted. So again, many thanks to those of you who have taken the time and the effort to update on pledge implementation. Of course, should you face any problem in submitting updates through the platform, please do reach out to us. We're also here to support you in this regard. We would like also to announce the incoming outreach campaign. By outreach campaign, it's basically a notification coming from our team to all pledging entities asking to update on pledge implementation. So this is done on a biannual basis. We conducted the last one in March, April. The next one will be carried out in October. Needless to say, it's very important for us to get the latest information on pledge implementation to inform as much as possible the deliberations and discussions at the GRF Progress Review in December. Last, you will see there is a snapshot on the slide. It's a bit of a preview. We will be launching in October a dedicated dashboard focusing on fulfilled pledges. The reason behind that, it's simply that we have realized, and thanks again to your engagement, that the dashboard itself, compiling 3,400 pledges, is sometimes challenging for the user to navigate. And it's we want also to give justice and specific visibility to those pledges that have been fulfilled. So a specific dashboard and web page will be established and launched in October, and we will have the opportunity to present it into more details at the next preparatory meeting. Next slide. I will not repeat what the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection presented in her opening remarks, but let me share with you all a list of non-exhaustive takeaways from the stock-taking process that we have conducted all together to date. We have noticed and we have recorded good progress when it comes to inclusion in national systems, health, education, and this is very encouraging. However, and while this is advancing in the right direction, there are still some constraints and it's still very much uneven. Those constraints, of course, and that will not come as a surprise, very often refer to funding. Economic inclusion is also growing, and that's also very much encouraging. The multi-stakeholder pledge on economic inclusion and social protection was perhaps is the multi-stakeholder pledge that has received the largest number of individual pledges, as you recall, and it has been a powerful engine to advance economic inclusion. But there are still some barriers, legal and technical barriers related to access to work in particular. And obviously, these are areas that we will need to discuss into more details in December to see how we can overcome them. Asylum systems are also modernizing through regional cooperation and digitization, but there is a need for sustained support. Of course, this links to financial support, but also technical. Third country solutions, this is the third objective of the compact. Really good progress on family reunification, but we do expect a decrease and some challenges in the future in 2025 and 2026. So obviously this will also require sustained engagement. When it comes to the objective 4, working towards conditions for conducive returns in countries of origin, we have a series of multi-stakeholder pledges that really speak to addressing the root causes of displacement, peace building pledge, but also the house landing and property multi-stakeholder pledges, but also the pledge that aims at addressing misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. There's been good progress, again, but at this point in time, when I'm at the time of updating you today, the picture of progress is still incomplete. So I'm calling on all of you to really update on the pledge implementation and engage into the stock-taking process. Last but not the least, and the Assistant High Commissioner has underlined it, the role played by the regional platforms, vehicle, be they support platforms or not, be they situational multi-stakeholder pledges or not, has been instrumental and pivotal to really advance protection and inclusion. And we look forward to discussing those mechanisms into more depth in December. Next slide. You will remember in June, I spent a bit of time presenting the lessons learned from the pledge matching concept and its implementation at country level and beyond. You will remember that we had identified good practices, good lessons, but also challenges. And we have been discussing, as we committed in June, we have continued the discussions, the work on working towards an evolved pledge matching strategy or concept. Let me be very clear here. The idea is not to revisit the concept. And the concept, as for those of you who did not attend the June meeting, is very much about pairing pledges between, or matching between a host country, making a policy pledge that would speak to, for instance, inclusion of refugees in national systems, changing the legal and policy framework, with a financial pledge made by a donor country, typically, that would really aim at supporting the implementation of that policy pledge. It's been a bit of a challenge for the reasons we had mentioned in June, but we have seen, and we are thankful to those of you who have been able to report on matching instances. And we want to be able to build on those good practices to stimulate, emulate, and replicate matching opportunities. Now, between now and December, we would like to conduct further engagement with you to fine-tune and firm up what we have been working on in terms of pledge matching strategy, which we see as having three main pillars. The first one is the same as of today. It's about genuine additionality, matching a policy pledge with additional financial support. At the same time, we do acknowledge that through the Global Refugee Forum process and the pledges, we have not necessarily been able to capture the full magnitude of support directed towards refugee responses. So this is also something that we would like to do justice to, be a bit fairer from that perspective. And even though such support has not been articulated through a pledge, that we would like to factor it and make sure it is presented as part of the matching reporting. The second point, it's very much aiming at addressing one of the challenges that was identified, which was basically some of the challenges that some of the donors have been raising, donor partners, is that some of the policy pledges made and committed did not include necessarily a costed plan. So of course, when one expects to be matched, it's perhaps difficult to allocate dedicated financial support. And we also want to make sure we don't fall into the pitfall of tight earmarking. This is where quality funding, a very important pledge, is extremely important. So it's about striking the right balance here. And this is where also it's important to link with national development plans to really echo and ensure that matching and pledges also speak to national priorities. And we want to make sure that as we move forward into implementing this matching strategy, we also connect the dots with other initiatives, such as sustainable responses, which many of you have been engaged in and through other briefings. Last but not the least, and that's perhaps the newest part, I would say, of the matching strategy, it's really about broadening the base of support and financing. And this really speaks to the first objective also of the compact, about easing pressures on host countries. And there are so many different ways of easing pressures. And for those of you who have been also following a bit more closely the discussions that we have as within UNHCR and beyond on innovative financing, we do see a number of opportunities and tools available to all of you to really consider to support matching policy pledges. But let me be very clear, this is not about substituting to additional support or easing pressure through direct bilateral aid, but it's about complementing. And when we speak about innovative financing here, we think of debt swap, bonds, and so on. That could be other tools out there that could be really used to this end. There are also the other type of tools through development cooperations and different type of agreements that should also be considered as mechanisms, vehicles to facilitate the pledge matching. So in terms of way forward, what we would like to propose is obviously to have, before the GRF Progress review, a consultation with volunteers, I would say. We will continue having discussions through the multi-stakeholder pledge framework, including the state leads of those multi-stakeholder pledges. But we think it's important to really unpack and make sure that this approach is palatable and makes sense so that we can even further discuss it in December. We also do acknowledge, and let me be also very clear here, that this is not a UNHCR's owned mechanism. It cannot work if it's not owned by the GCR stakeholders, starting with obviously the policy pledging entities and the financial pledging entities. So it's very important that you are in the driving seat and you own it. And this is where, again, we would like to establish a light touch, small working group that could perhaps help pilot at country level, because this is where actually things do happen. This is where the coordination needs to take place. And this is where matching will happen. And last, and sorry, I started from the bottom, it's a bottom-up approach. We will ensure as we move forward, starting next year, obviously, to conduct biannual review exercise. It doesn't mean we will put more work on you. We will use the biannual outreach campaigns that we do through in terms of pledge updates to inform this exercise. Next slide. Now, moving on to the December meeting, the GRF Progress Review. And apologies to those of you who are probably getting a bit sick with that slide because I have been showing it and I see some people laughing in the room. But I'm sure we have also newcomers and new attendees in the room or online. The meeting will take place from the 15th to the 17th of December at the CICG. And thank you, Switzerland, for allowing us to use the premises. Expected participation is senior government officials. So of course, this in terms of level, and we have received some questions, this would range typically between head of relevant department, director to vice minister. But again, we will certainly not discourage higher level participation. But we will be clearly perhaps, our expectations are obviously from that perspective lower than at the Global Refugee Forum. This is not meant to be another Global Refugee Forum. It's the midway point in between two Global Refugee Fora. But we have, and we must make this meeting count in terms of stock taking, but also looking forward and use it as an opportunity for renewed commitment. The program, and I will walk you through on this in a minute, will be a dynamic mix of plenary sessions interspersed with spotlight or panel sessions, as well as side events. We want to make sure we'll carve out enough time and space for meaningful discussions to make sure that we can address all the issues, but also discuss all the opportunities that will have been identified through the stock taking process. The Assistant High Commissioner and the Ambassador mentioned it in the opening remarks. Meaningful refugee participation is and will be a key feature of the event. We aim at maintaining the same standard than at the GRF in terms of percentage of participation. And we're extremely grateful to Switzerland and other donors who have expressed interest, and we will be supporting the participation of refugees in the event. But let me just reiterate the call made by the Assistant High Commissioner. We really call on particular states, but also other stakeholders to include refugees and people with lived experience in their delegation. I'm sure you will have many questions on that. So we have put online a document, an FAQ, which will be circulating the link when we disseminate the summary note and the presentation. And of course, we remain at your disposal should you have any specific question. Next slide. Now, the format of the program, obviously something that you also, no big surprise there, opening and closing ceremonies. We will ensure that there is sufficient time and space for general debate. We will follow the spirit of the Global Compact and the format of this meeting in terms of alternating speaking slots. We do call on all of you, all stakeholders, to limit your interventions to 3 minutes each. And we would very much welcome such interventions to be focusing on statements of impact or new announcement, in particular, new pledges. It is not a global refugee forum, but considering the context we are all facing, it is very important that there is that we all reiterate our commitment to multilateralism and also support to host countries in a collective manner. We will have parallel side events, and I will walk you through the list of thematic of themes that have been identified so far that will compose the program. We will also have a speaker's corner, which will be focused on lived experience of displacement. This is something that was considered as a success, as a very engaging moment at the Global Refugee Forum. So we also took into account your feedback from the GRF. We also call on those of you, those partners who are willing to organize events to let us know that this is what we call linked events. They would be linked to the program, but they would be off-site. So that would be in particular for those of you who think that perhaps the program does not reflect certain topics. And again, please reach out to us. Last, we will have, as at the GRF, what we call a digital space, which is on our digital platform, a specific space that will allow all of you to share with us some good practices, some also recorded messages, so that we could have them made available on that digital space. Next slide. So this slide is to be looked at in combination with the previous one, but this is basically how the 3 days would look like typically. We will also, and I think that's one of the feedback we wanted to take into account, make sure that the number of events remain manageable to all of you. I think the GRF was extremely lively, but we also understood that perhaps there was almost maybe too much for some of you to be able to follow every event. So we have also taken that into account, let alone the fact that obviously the budget constraints are also implying that we have to be much more humble from that perspective. Let me just remind you all that on day 2 in the evening, that we'll also have the Nansen award ceremony at the Bâtiment des Forces Motrices. Next slide. So allow me to spend a few minutes on this slide, which is basically the what we call the event mapping. What is essential for us, and based on the different consultations that we have conducted, is that the GRF Progress Review really looks at the 4 objectives of the compact: is pressure on host countries, enhancing self-reliance, expanding third country solutions, as well as working on conditions for working towards conducive conditions in countries of origin. So here you see a number of themes which obviously are almost definite, but the purpose of that meeting is to have your feedback and to take advantage of the coming days also to finalize this program. And the way this slide is presented, of course, many of the topics speak to the 4 objectives of the compact. But you can see that some of the themes are perhaps more linked to objective 1 or objective 4. But there are also a number of enabling cross-cutting themes that are very important to dive into more depth and discuss at the December meeting, as well as, of course, some specific situations. We will also, as I mentioned earlier on, make sure that those topics, those themes are also connected with other initiatives. So you don't see, for instance, a specific point on sustainable responses, because it is cross-cutting in nature, and it speaks to self-reliance, it speaks to of course, returns, it speaks to inclusion in national systems, and it definitely speaks to easing pressure on host countries as well. Next slide. And that will be the last one. And apologies for speaking, taking a bit of time. So what are the ways to engage between now and then for all of you? Well, first of all, we count on you to contribute to the event preparations, in particular the different side events. And you have different ways of doing so. Of course, the easiest way, the most efficient way is through the multi-stakeholder pledge framework. But of course, myself and my team, we are at your disposal. So please do reach out to us bilaterally as needed. We will certainly be in touch with a number of you as we make preparations. And this also includes the linked events that I mentioned earlier on. Please let us know as early as possible should you wish to host such events. Please continue engaging actively in the multi-stakeholder pledge process. And that's very important in terms of participating in the incoming stock-taking moments or other coordination meetings. And allow me just to remind you all of what the multi-stakeholder pledge framework is all about. For those of you who participated in the 2023 preparations to the Global Refugee Forum, those multi-stakeholder pledges were also nicknamed as mega pledges. So they aimed at transforming, making an impact, making a difference for refugees, for forcibly displaced. It's not about UNHCR, it's not about processes, it's really about coming together and really advancing the 4 objectives of the compact. There are definitely, and we have seen actually some of those multi-stakeholder pledges being fulfilled, being delivered. I'm thinking of the Chile Action Plan, for instance. So it's really important that those pledges continue being advanced, And our objective moving forward beyond the GRF Progress review, it's also to further strengthen them, anchor them into the Global Compact itself, linking them to the 4 objectives of the Compact. And we believe that there will be opportunities actually to also work on new ones, considering the developments that we have been seeing over the past month. Another way to engage, very important, is to continue, of course, on delivering on pledges and on reporting on their implementation. That's extremely important. I made that point earlier on, so I will not spend too much time on that. Another way to engage is really to upscale efforts to really support host countries in implementing policy pledges through pledge matching. Another way to engage is to sustain momentum by speaking to the Global Compact, to the Global Refugee Forum substance in key policy fora. I mentioned some of them, obviously the General Assembly, but also the World Social Summit. And last but not the least, and I will close with this point, really calling on all of you to consider coming forward in December with announcement, preferably pledges, but also announcement of renewed commitment and renewed support. Thank you, Assistant High Commissioner.
Thank you for these updates, Mr. Brass. We will now move to the discussion component of the agenda, and we'll hand over to Ambassador Tony to moderate this session.
Thank you very much, Assistant High Commissioner. We will now open the floor to hear the relevant updates from multi-stakeholders pledge leaders and other multi-stakeholders contributing to the implementation of the Compact. I would like to ask you to limit your interventions to 3 minutes maximum to ensure that we will have adequate time for all the speakers to intervene and that we can finish this session of intervention at 16:50 before giving the floor back to you for the concluding remarks. If you wish to speak, please raise your nameplate. And for online participants who wish to speak, please indicate your name and affiliation in the chat box and also raise your hand so that we can give you the floor when the time comes. We will do our best to accommodate as many interventions as possible within the time allotted to these sessions. And thank you very much for playing with the rules of the game. I'd like now to give the floor to Colombia.
Much and good afternoon, colleagues. Colombia, as co-convener of the Second Global Refugee Forum and as chairs of the MIRP Support Platform 2025, continues to demonstrate valuable momentum in strengthening regional coordination and alignment with international protection standards. Our active engagement in key processes such as the Cartagena 40 process, the Mercosur CONARES Forum, and our leadership with MIRPs reflects a steadfast commitment to advancing protection and durable solutions. Our willingness to host and lead regional and international forums, including the recent GFMD, underscores our dedication to placing protection at the heart of regional cooperation. A living example of regional solidarity is MIRPS, a state-led initiative by 7 countries in Central America and Mexico, supported by UNHCR and OAS. As chair of the support platform, Colombia works alongside 14 committed states, international financial institutions, and organizations to advance protection and solutions for refugees, refugee status applicants, internally displaced persons, returnees, and stateless persons. We commend Costa Rica's leadership as MIRPs pro tempore and the work of Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Costa Rica in leading the regional technical teams. This year, our joint efforts are guided by 4 regional MIRPs pledges, and allow me to highlight recent progress on them. First, on refugee protection system, Colombia hosted virtual learning events on reducing refugee status determination backlogs and on international protection for women and girls, with contributions from Argentina, Canada, Costa Rica, Spain, Mexico, UN Women, and UNHCR. Also, as part of broader reforms mandated by our constitutional court, this year we granted the right to work to asylum seekers. A new refugee protection system is expected to be consolidated in 2026. Second, on socioeconomic inclusion, Colombia prioritized regularization and launched initiatives such as PEP Tutor, aimed at guardians and custodians of Venezuelan children with more than 270,000 beneficiaries. Third, on statistical inclusion within the framework of the MIRPs, Costa Rica and Honduras co-led a stock-taking event showcasing progress in data inclusion. The European Union reaffirmed its support, and ECLAC's technical assistance was recognized as essential. Fourth, on child protection, this month, Colombia extended the Primero la Niñez measure to prevent statelessness among children born to Venezuelan parents. Also, on durable solution for IDPs, we incorporated provisions to the Victims Law for safe returns and local integration, reinforcing the country's holistic approach to protection and durable solutions. Last year, we made significant progress in implementing our UN Common Pledge with support from the UN country team. We are committed to the multi-stakeholder pledge on peace building and conflict prevention through the periodic events addressed to the Colombian victims of armed conflict that are exiled here in Switzerland. The international community, including member states, UN agencies, and non-governmental organizations have accompanied us in these recognitions that are part of the Truth Commission's recommendations. We have paid tribute to more than 50 Colombian refugees here in Geneva. We are committed to transform pledges into meaningful change and protection, and we look forward to having a very rich event on December 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colombia, for your intervention. And I give the floor now to Chile. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Regarding our multi-stakeholder pledge on Cartagena Plus 40, in December 2024, Latin America and the Caribbean countries adopted the Chile Declaration and Plan of Action called a regional cooperation and solidarity framework to strengthen protection and inclusive solutions for refugee displaced persons and stateless persons, and the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees in Latin America and the Caribbean, reaffirming our collective commitment to strengthen protection and solutions for displaced and stateless persons across the region. The plan of action contains 101 recommendations and 5 chapters that also target our commitment at the Global Refugee Forum. The first one focuses on protection and mirrors the root-based approach line of work. The recommendations promote regional cooperation, especially in borders areas, to strengthen identification, reception, referral mechanisms, and data. The region understands it's not enough to act alone, but together across borders and sectors. The second chapter focuses on solutions. For that, the United Nations Development Framework mechanism and sustainable responses are relevant. As the support of development actors, the other agencies of United Nations and the private sector, as well as civil society, are essential to accomplish those recommendations. The third chapter addresses displacement in the context of disaster and climate change. The region understood the impact of displacement and the negative effects of climate change, and the importance of acting in coordination to reduce silos to tackle the needs of displaced people. In July 17 and 18, we had our first meeting of the follow-up and coordination mechanism for the implementation of the Chile Plan of Action. This meeting was crucial. First, to determine the 15 priorities that the region will be working coordinately for the next 2 years. It doesn't mean that the other recommendations are going to be left aside. On the contrary, at the national level, we will keep working, but as a region, we want to improve the collaboration and coordination. Second, because we elected Mexico to be the vice chair of the follow-up and coordination mechanism. Just to share some priorities, we will address statelessness, as well as improved digitalization on the case of registration and management, access to labor market, family reunification, among others. In mid-November, we will have our first meeting of the support platform for the Chile Plan of Action. We invite all the actors, refugees and stateless NGOs, as well as agencies, funds and programs of United Nations, development actors, financial actors, other states and donors to be part of this meeting, which we hope to have concrete actions to start developing our priorities. We appreciate all the work and support we have had from UNHCR in this process. Thank you.
I thank Chile, and I give now the floor to Iraq. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Guided by its firm belief in the principles of international solidarity and the burden sharing, and in line with the pledges announced in GRF 2023, the Republic of Iraq continues its national efforts to enhance the protection of refugees and to ensure their fundamental rights on an equal basis with Iraqi citizens. In this regard, the draft refugee law is currently undergoing advanced stage of reviewing before the State Council, paving the way for its forthcoming enactment. This will establish a modern and comprehensive legal framework to regulate refugee matters and strengthen their protection. With respect to services, the Permanent Committee for Refugees Affairs at the Ministry of Interior, in close coordination with relevant national ministries and the institutions, continues to provide a wide range of essential services, including first, issuance of official documents such as identification cards, birth and death certificates, marriage contracts, and the other legal procedures. Ensuring access to essential services such as education at all levels, healthcare, and municipal services without imposing any financial burdens. Third, provision of social protection through the disbursement of allowance to vulnerable groups, including the needy, women, and orphans. Facilitating freedom of movement by granting approval for travel and return, and verifying documents for purposes such as vehicle registration, driving license, and retirement procedures. Supporting the most vulnerable, such as persons with disabilities and the elderly, through mobile field team. These concrete steps not only reaffirms Iraq's commitment to international standards, but also reflect its political and humanitarian will to establish an environment that guarantees dignity and protection for all refugees residing on its territory, in line with the principles of international refugee law and the spirit of the Global Refugee Forum. I thank you.
I thank Iraq, and I now give the floor to Uganda. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Assistant High Commissioner and your very good team for this important meeting. As a co-convener or one of the co-conveners of the GRF, I'd like to extend our appreciation in our capacity as a co-convener to you, Assistant High Commissioner, and your team, to the UNHCR. You're very grateful specifically to your team and to the governance team that has worked overnight and overtime considering the current restructuring. Despite the pressure we may push from this side, we want you to convey, to tell them that we see them, we appreciate them, and we know they're doing so much, but we count on them still to deliver this baby. We are 3 months away. With that said, we approached the GRF with a very expectant heart and belief that it was indeed a meeting intentioned to bolster solidarity and international support to announce transformational pledges. When my Prime Minister led the delegation here, she verbatimly read the statement of our president and confirmed our key pledges in key areas of self-reliance, of climate change, in areas of transition, so that we'll be able to run and manage the refugee process. I would love and wish that in the next 3 months, we would be able to indeed state in our statement the impact. I'm afraid that the impact might sound negative, but we shall tell our truth, and we will not shy away from telling our truth. We feel that as a host country that has continued to be celebrated as one of the most progressive, I'm afraid that I often take the floor and sound as a prophet of doom, but it's our truth and it's our reality. And if we stop talking, you will think it is well. It's not well. It is not well with a country that is hosting 2 million refugees, with 600 refugees arriving on a daily. And I can't wait for the donor colleagues that will be traveling to Uganda to see this with their own eyes, that what we tell you in these rooms, where we put on good jackets and wear good perfumes, things are really bad outside this room. So when we go to the meeting of December, our ask is one. We need to move out from the rhetoric, move out from the good strategic concepts, and support the countries that are supporting refugees. We say that the persons of concern are the most affected. Actually, the host is the most affected because we are stuck with a population that is hungry, that are dropouts, and a real imminent danger to criminal action. If you want security, like we spoke yesterday, refugees or human beings are like water. You can't block water. You can build near water and silt, but it will find its way. When refugees are seated in Uganda and they can't have food, they don't have breakfast, they don't have sanitary towel, or they don't have education, they will risk everything to find their way. And no amount of investment in the roots, unless you support where they're coming from and where they're being hosted, will save you. We hope that this high level reminds us of our transformational pledges we made, from being read in good language to changing what is happening on ground. And we are counting on you as a co-convener. Stand with us. Don't leave this for us alone. We've done so much. Thank you.
I thank Uganda, and I now give the floor to the OECD joining us online. Okay, we will wait until OECD is ready, and I would like to give the floor to the next one, also online, which is Bondeko Refugee Livelihoods Center. You have the floor.
Okay, I'm now
this is
unmuted.
So sorry, sorry about it.
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. On the behalf of the OECD, let me first thank UNHCR for its invaluable work around the globe, and also for its long-standing partnerships with the OECD in producing the data, the evidence, and the analysis on forced displacement. At the 2019 Global Refugee Forum, the OECD committed to submitting ODA data to refugee situation to help measure progress in implementing the Global Compact on Refugees. And this data set informs 5 of the 16 GCR indicators. It also contributes to effective programmings, and it helps address the impact of large refugee movement on host countries. We are now finalizing the latest data cycle, the latest data analysis for the upcoming GCR indicator report. And let me highlight the following trends. In 2023, ODA to refugee situation peaked at 14.4 billion, which is a slight increase from the 22 and 21 data. Protracted refugee situations were still largely addressed through short-term humanitarian financing, which in 2023 accounted for 61% of all ODA to refugee situation in developing countries, which is a lower share than 2022. The responsibility sharing continued to rely heavily on 4 key donors in 2023. And namely the United States, Germany, the EU institutions, and the World Bank, which collectively provided 74% of all financing in developing countries. And while the international community shared the responsibility for hosting refugees, the financial distribution remains uneven, as in previous cycles of analysis. 61.5% of country allocable development finance for refugee situations in low and middle income countries went to just 7 recipients in 2023. And primarily, these were upper middle income countries. The largest recipients included Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. In 22 and 23, we saw a significant rise in donor refugee costs due to the conflict in Ukraine and the arrival of millions of refugees in the European DAC member states primarily. And this figure declined in 24 and is expected to decrease further in 25. Finally, and based on the preliminary OECD data for 24, the overall ODA fell by 9% in 24, with a projected further decline of 9 to 17% in total ODA, and a 21 to 36% in humanitarian financing for 25. Distinguished delegates, at the 23 Global Refugee Forum, a common position on addressing forced displacement with a comprehensive humanitarian development peace nexus approach was submitted as a pledge by those INCAF members or DAC INCAF members supporting the Global Compact on Refugees. Not only it supports the early mitigation of shocks linked to forced displacement in low and middle income countries, but it also emphasizes the need to help address the recurring drivers of displacement. To address forced displacement, investments in peace are essential and requires a collective effort by donor, displacement-affected countries, countries of origin, and other stakeholders in the spirit of the Compact. We look forward to continuing our efforts to advance the objective of the Global Compact on Refugees. Thank you.
I thank the OSCD, and I now give the floor to Bondeko Refugee Livelihood Center, also online.
Dear Chair, Excellencies, friends, my name is Paul Kitima, CEO of Bondeko Refugee Livelihood Center, a refugee-led organization based in Uganda. I am pleased to announce that I'm the new co-lead of the multi-stakeholder pledge on advancing localization in displacement and statelessness responses. This new role allows me to bring the expertise and perspective of an RLO to policy discussions at global level. I'm honored to be here with you today to provide an update on the progress made under the multi-stakeholder pledge. 2 weeks ago, signatories and reference group of our pledge came together to review progress made since the GRF 2023. As you all know, we are facing an unprecedented funding situation that puts localization at a crossroad. Yet, we are proud to share some of the progress made. On policy, countries like Australia and Uganda and partners such as IFRC have developed policies and strategies that put localization at the center. On capacity sharing, more than 3/4 of pledges included commitment under this theme, many already implemented, from BRAC's training of Bangladeshi NGOs to PILNET's matching of RLOs with free legal support. On participation, we see new examples of RLOs and women-led organizations being brought into policy dialogues and coordination platforms. On funding, some organizations such as HIAS and ICVA have piloted flexible funding models that give RLOs the space to grow and lead. But these gains are fragile. Funding cuts are forcing partnerships and projects to be canceled. Local actors risk being excluded from coordination mechanisms. Capacity strengthening and equitable partnerships are undermined just when they are most needed. I leave you with 3 clear messages. First, localization must be pursued for the right reasons, to build principled and equitable partnerships and shift power, not as a cost-saving measure. Second, inclusion is non-negotiable. Local actors, especially those led by displaced and stateless persons, must be part of humanitarian reform discussions and decision-making at all levels. Lastly, resourcing is urgent. Local actors who remain on the ground providing critical services need predictable, flexible funding now more than ever. On behalf of the co-conveners and the pledge reference group, I invite all of you who seek to advance localization to reach out and engage with us. The multi-stakeholder group is also a space to joint learning, collaboration, and collective actions. Together, we can protect the progress made and build the foundations for more locally led responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I now give the floor to Youth Initiative for Development, which is also joining us online. Okay, Youth Association is not here for the moment, so I give the floor to Pilnet, which is also joining us online.
Hello and thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jasmine Simpringham from Pilnet, and we coordinate the Global Legal Community Pledge, which brings together over 100 legal actors around the shared goal of expanding access to legal help for displaced people. I'd like to provide a quick update today on our stock-taking efforts, which have been a continuous, multi-pronged exercise, beginning at Pilnet's 2024 Global Forum in Bangkok and complemented this year by surveys and in-person and online interviews with our pledgers. Our stock-taking shows that despite the pledge's goal, since the 2023 GRF, accessing legal help has become harder for those displaced. Funding cuts of up to 60% have forced NGO pledges to shut offices and let staff, and in some cases local NGO partners go, severely impacting on their ability to meet their pledged commitments to provide free legal assistance to those in need. At the same time, we have seen increased detention, accelerated timelines, and digital-only systems disadvantage asylum applicants and hinder lawyers' ability to assist. The legal community has also faced harassment, intimidation, and in some cases, prosecution for representing asylum seekers. Even private sector firms providing such assistance pro bono have come under unprecedented government scrutiny. But despite these challenges, we as a legal community reaffirm our pledge to use the law to advance refugee rights, justice, and solutions. And we're doing all that we can to work with and for refugees to deliver on our pledge in these difficult times. We would also like to share 3 key messages today in advance of the GRF PR in Geneva. Legal assistance and empowerment can be life-saving, and funding this important work must not be forgotten in the humanitarian reset. For many, a lawyer determines whether they can find safety or face return to persecution. Early access to legal assistance and due process are vital to robust asylum systems. Legal assistance at an early stage has shown to lead to stronger, more decision-ready applications, helping states identify protection needs and improving fairness and efficiency. And third, the rule of law requires that lawyers can represent all clients, including those without legal documentation, as asylum seekers often are. Measures need to be taken by governments to expand, not restrict, access to legal support. We call on delegates to remember the importance of legal assistance and empowerment as we work towards realizing the goals of the GCR, and we look forward to discussing this further at the GRF PR in Geneva in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for your intervention. And I would like now to give the floor to Dieva Romada on behalf of the Advisory Board of Organizations led by forcibly displaced and stateless persons. You have the floor. Also online.
Thank you. Hello, dear colleagues and sisters. My name is Yana Lubimova, and it is an honor for me to speak on behalf of UNHCR's Advisory Board of Organization led by forcibly displaced and stateless person. I'm twice displaced Ukrainian woman and human rights lawyer and co-founder of Congress of IDP Councils of Ukraine. My life and work have been shaped by displacement. As we approach the GRF Progress review, the world faces record levels of displacement, shrinking protection space and declining resources. Over 123 million people are forcibly displaced, and nearly a billion lack legal identity. These are not just a statistic, but urgent call for durable solutions. We would like to share 4 key messages. One of them, institutionalized and resource participation. This means ensuring that displaced persons are the most vulnerable people with lived experience of forced displacement and statelessness are not only invited but enabled to lead in policy design, monitoring, and implementation. Effective participation required resources to implement interpretation, caregiving, digital asset, and travel. Second one about addressing pressing needs. To truly respond to the priorities of displaced community, we must focus on the issues that matter most to them. One such area is housing, land, and property rights, which is not just only rights, but the foundation of dignity, safe reliance, and social cohesion. Involving displaced communities in shaping housing and restitution policies builds trust and ensures durable reality-based solutions. Third one about financing refugee lead and displaced lead organization. These organizations are not on the front line yet receive only a fraction of resources. Direct multi-year funding without dependence of intermediaries is critical. Piloting such funding before GRF 2027 would show commitment and strength and the resilience and leadership of affected communities. At last but not at least, accountability and inclusive data. Durable solutions require transparent system for tracking pledges and results. Data must be disaggregated by age, gender, and diversity and collected in partnership with displaced communities. Transparent monitoring of participation pledges will help prevent tokenism and ensure equitable outcomes. We really thank UNHCR states and partners who stand with us. Yet solidarity alone is not enough. Durable solution will only emerge when people with lived experience is not just consulted, but part of leadership. We urge you to act with urgency to institutionalize meaningful participation, to resource it, and to anchor in dignity, equality, and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. And I would like now to give the floor to France. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie beaucoup le Haut-Commissariat pour les informations qui nous ont été présentées tout à l'heure, qui sont très utiles et qui nous permettent de préparer au mieux l'échéance importante de la réunion sur les progrès du Forum mondial sur les réfugiés qui se tiendra en décembre prochain. La France est très fière d'avoir coparrainé le Forum mondial en 2023 et nous rappelons notre engagement déterminé à mettre en œuvre le pacte mondial sur les réfugiés qui est et qui demeure le meilleur outil à notre disposition pour répondre aux défis des personnes déplacées de force. Ce texte demeure notre boussole et la réunion de décembre sera un moment important pour sa mise en œuvre. Cette réunion sera notamment l'occasion pour la France de faire un premier bilan de notre initiative avec elle pour la protection et l'inclusion des femmes et filles réfugiées, initiative que nous avons lancée lors du Forum mondial sur les réfugiés avec le concours de dizaines d'États, d'organisations et du secteur privé. À cet égard, le ministère des Affaires étrangères organisera en novembre prochain des consultations et des événements à Paris en lien avec le HCR afin de faire le point sur les concrétisations effectives des engagements des acteurs français, des acteurs institutionnels, des ONG et des entreprises du secteur privé. Je vous remercie.
Merci à la délégation française pour son intervention. And I give now the floor to Youth Initiative for Development, which is joining us online. You have the floor. Okay, I think we have a small technical problem, and we move to the next delegation, which is in the room, which is Jordan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This is co-convening the 2023 Global Refugee Forum. Jordan has turned some of its pledges into concrete action. We advanced economic inclusion and social protection, expanded refugee access to national education, including raising higher education enrollment. And we strengthened mental health and community support services, child protection systems, and positive parenting support. And we invested in climate energy projects and support programs for inclusion. Jordan received 73 pledges, and by mid-2025, we have achieved sort of progress. To sustain this progress, we need continued predictable financing. And finally, tomorrow, together with the GRF team, Jordan will host a meeting of the Arab group to share updates on the GRF pledges. And I warmly invite all Arab group colleagues who are present here in the room with us today to join tomorrow's discussion. I thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And I now give the floor to Refugee Point on behalf of the Global Family Reunification Network. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm with Refuge Point, the Secretariat of the Global Family Reunification Network, and a member of its advisory group, which was and remains the co-convener along with UNHCR of the multi-stakeholder pledge to support refugee family reunification. The pledge has been led by the governments of Brazil and Portugal, the OECD, DLA Piper, Migration Inc., and Refuge Point. And I'm here today to give a very brief update on our work together. Earlier today, in fact, we released our first annual Pledge Community Progress Report. As I hope that all of you will see when the report makes its way to your inboxes, it is not just standard baseline reporting. It is a rich mix of best practices and hard data. As important as the report itself was and is the group effort that went into creating it. Led by the network's advisory group, 35 of 40 pledge partners, including states, civil society, the private sector, and more, all contributed content to the report, illustrating how our individual pledges have been the building blocks of a multi-stakeholder community working together towards a shared goal. On that point, the very early and still preliminary data in our report suggests that we are on track to meet our goal of helping 1 million refugees reunite with their families by 2030. I must add, though, that our data was collected much earlier this year, and in the meantime, sadly, we have seen efforts to restrict refugee access to family reunification. Nevertheless, we are actively strategizing and working together to meet and overcome these challenges, and we look forward to sharing news of additional progress later this year at the GRF Progress Review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Refugee Point. And I now give the floor to Plan International on behalf of the Child Rights Initiative. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the Initiative for Child Rights in the Global Compact, whose members are united behind one aim. Children, wherever they are, whatever their status, must not be left behind. The Child Rights Multi-Stakeholder Pledge focuses on 4 priorities that children themselves tell us matter the most: protection, participation, education, and access to key services, including health, mental health, and social protection. At the Global Refugee Forum 2023, 95 pledges were made to improve the lives of refugee children. Some are already making a difference. The Global Ministerial Conference on Ending Violence Against Children in Bogota brought together leaders from 130 countries, generating new commitments and youth leadership. The Dutch-funded Prospect Partnership is expanding protection and opportunities across the Middle East and Africa. And Switzerland and Greece have strengthened protection for unaccompanied children through mobile services and safe accommodation. Yet, progress is uneven. Only 4 countries pledged to support children's participation and just 3 on social protection, far below what is needed. At the same time, funding cuts, restrictive asylum policies, and rising xenophobia are eroding refugee rights and shrinking access to services. This trend significantly undermined the ability of all partners of this pledge to deliver on their own pledges, ultimately affecting the lives of refugee children worldwide. We must seize this moment and act by leveraging pledges to integrate refugee children into inclusive national systems, investing in child participation so children help shape their policies that affect them, turning pledges into action with investment, accountability, and political will, and protecting gains aimed at funding shortfalls. For the first time, child rights feature prominently in the Global Refugee Forum pledges. This is progress, but promises must become classrooms, protection services, safe shelters, and restore futures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Plan International. I now give the floor to Youth Initiative. We try again for a third time. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for another opportunity given to me. I think now can be held very well. So I was saying my name is Muranga Kandanda, and I'm joining from Kenya representing the multi-stakeholder pledge on meaningful refugee participation. We are co-led by NGOs, which are Oxfam and Independent Diplomat, together with refugee-led organization, New Women Connectors, APNO, and Youth Initiative for Development. As an update, we have been working collectively with pledge co-leads, signatories, and partners on a work plan leading to the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review in this progress under the pledge. Through the UNHCR stock-taking process, we have seen encouraging steps forward. Greater participation of refugees in policy-making forums, recognition of refugees in leadership in national frameworks, and more RLOs including coordination mechanisms. To highlight a few examples, Asia Pacific, a partnership between the UK government and APNO has enabled 5 refugee-led organizations to access direct funding and capacity support. And in Kenya, the RLO's technical working group by the coordination of the refugee-led organization network of Kenya, the RELON. We are also seeing institutions shift towards two-way capacity sharing, as shown by the training session that New Women Connectors has delivered to ANGOs, UN agencies, and governments. Looking ahead to the pledge colleagues have hoped to convene a side event to reaffirm the central when humanitarian and displacement responses are facing an acute funding crisis, and to broaden the circle of stakeholders committed to this agenda. Finally, I am pleased to announce that as colleagues of the multi-stakeholder pledge, we'll be hosting 3 virtual training sessions at the end of this month. These sessions are designed to equip stakeholders with practical tools to effectively engage and empower refugees in the review process. For further details, please reach out to UNHCR or to the pledge colleagues directly. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Youth Initiative, for your intervention. And I give now the floor to the last speaker on my list, which is UNICEF. You have the floor, probably online. Okay, I give the floor so to the next speaker, which is International Detention Coalition. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to, we have a multi-stakeholder pledge on alternatives to detention that International Detention Coalition is co-leading with UNICEF and with the support from UNHCR as part, and this pledge is looking at a number of different member states are also pledged under this multi-stakeholder pledge. As some of the previous speakers were saying, we're seeing the increase of detention in many parts of the world and some very negative developments on this issue, but I also wanted to speak about some of the positive initiatives that are happening specifically with the pledge. One of them is, for instance, the government of Colombia sharing good practice on non-detention in different countries in Africa, including Zimbabwe, and Senegal and other countries like Malawi and Zambia. The other interesting practice is in the implementation of the pledge is the government of Thailand, where more than 2,000 children have been released from immigration detention, and where currently the Memorandum of Understanding on Alternatives to Detention is being evaluated and implemented advancing the pledge. And also the regional peer learning platform in Asia Pacific that IDC is convening that has the governments of Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, and New Zealand, where different practices and the pledge from the Australian government to share practices on protection for children has also been implemented with a meeting in Sydney at the beginning of the year. These are just some of the initiatives that are happening on this, and it's important. I would like to encourage other states to continue pledging on this issue. Detention is crucial, and the effects of it are devastating, and therefore is essential to continue advancing on implementing alternatives to detention that are by far more humane and comply with rights, are cost-effective, but are also effective in terms of engagement with processes. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. Do we have someone else wishing to take the floor? It doesn't seem to be the case, meaning that we will finish with a little bit of time in advance. So thank you very much to all of you who have spoken, who have intervened. And now I would like to invite the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection to provide us some answers and thoughts about what we heard from the interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you to all of the interveners for your incredibly rich statements and raising very critical issues. I'm not sure that I can do justice to all of you, but I will attempt it. First of all, Colombia, I do want to thank you really for the incredibly proactive role that Colombia has played in regional processes. You mentioned them, MIRPS, Cartagena +40 and others, to name just a few, and also for underlining the concrete outcomes that you have really focused on. I think you really are a lesson to other regions as well in how to manage displacement situations, be it refugees or internal displacement, and we are grateful. And also notably in relation to the implementation of the peace building pledge, which these days, as you can imagine, has a very specific connotation as well. Chile, thank you again for highlighting the importance of the Chile Declaration and Plan of Action. We have mentioned this in several fora, UNHCR, in order to highlight the importance of this plan of action, and certainly the 15 priorities that you have underlined as well, including statelessness, registration, access to labor markets, etc. And also the importance of the route-based approach in addressing issues of displacement in the region. Again, very critical issues that we are following up on closely with you in collaboration with the countries in the region. And thank you very much for highlighting the importance of this. Iraq, thank you for providing information, the very positive progress made on enacting legislation relating to refugee protection, and also the very specific measures that the government is taking in relation to really addressing the needs of refugees with specific needs or vulnerabilities. And that really is in the true spirit of the Global Compact of Refugees. So thank you very much. Uganda, as always, Mary, a very, very compelling intervention, and I can only endorse the very heartfelt plea that you made, not just for Uganda alone, but representing all of the major refugee hosting countries, which are in exactly that same situation. It is unfortunate that compassion and open borders policies for refugees should not be met with an equal contribution from the donor community in terms of funding those programs that help to keep these policies afloat and help to ensure that these refugees are protected and assisted as they need to be. And we can only endorse your plea and your call for increasing assistance or increased assistance to help the refugee hosting countries to share that responsibility in terms of hosting these refugees and for such protracted periods of time. OECD in his intervention did outline or highlight really the importance of data. But again, the analysis of the data on the ODA and humanitarian financing has just confirmed something that we are all painfully conscious of, which is the decreasing ODA and humanitarian funding as the years progress, certainly from year to year. And he highlighted particularly some of the critical areas, notably in 2024 and this year in 2025 as well. For the Bondeko Refugee Livelihood Center, thank you very much. As a refugee-led organization, we are extremely happy to have you and speaking so actively on localization. This is, as you know, a priority for most members, if not all the members of the humanitarian community. This was part of the grand bargain, part of the commitments that UNHCR certainly has made. And we are happy to note the progress made despite some of despite the funding crisis. And as you yourself pointed out, the gains that have been made are fragile and would certainly be undermined by the continuing decrease in humanitarian funding, particularly in the areas of capacity building and capacity strengthening, without which these RLOs would not exist. PILNET, thank you as always for the critical role that your network plays in providing legal assistance to refugees and asylum seekers and stateless persons wherever they are. You have pointed out very critically that legal assistance is not a luxury. It is a life-saving activity in many contexts. It is also plays a very critical role in asylum processes around the world, and it's the need to ensure that legal assistance is provided to all asylum seekers, regardless of status and regardless of documentation. And thank you very much for highlighting those issues. To the advisory board of organizations led by the forcibly displaced and stateless persons, again, thank you very much for speaking on behalf of these organizations, pointing out the shrinking protection space, the dire financial situation, and highlighting the need for meaningful refugee participation of the forcibly displaced, but also highlighting critical issues such as housing, land, and property, and certainly the need for direct multi-year funding to RLOs wherever they are. And last but not least, of course, the importance of disaggregated data. And we do take your final comment into account that solidarity alone is not enough, and that certainly is a sentiment endorsed by UNHCR. Je remercie aussi la France pour son intervention, son rôle en tant que coparrain et aussi le rôle que la France joue dans l'avancement des droits et des privilèges accordés aux réfugiés, des femmes réfugiées et des filles réfugiées aussi. Merci beaucoup. Et bien sûr, on attend avec beaucoup d'anticipation les informations sur le progrès qui a été accompli dans ce domaine. Jordan, thank you again for your co-convener role, for your staunch upholding of refugee protection principles, despite very, as you can imagine, important domestic challenges that you have. And again, for highlighting, providing us with an update on the pledges that have been made, 73, as you mentioned in total, but also for highlighting the funding situation. I would really like to echo your call that there is indeed the meeting of the Arab group, and we would want to see as many member states in the region as possible attending that meeting, because it is critical to discuss these issues. Refuge Point, thank you for highlighting really the importance of family reunification, and we agree with you. We are seeing significant restrictions, unfortunately, in this area in terms of policies being adopted by certain destination or receiving countries. Thank you for pointing that out. We do hope that you do manage, despite all of this, to achieve your goal of reuniting 1 million refugees with their families by 2030. Plan International, thank you again for highlighting the very, very important issue of child protection and child rights, the multi-stakeholder pledge, the challenges that you have highlighted, whether it be xenophobia, funding constraints, or restrictive policies. We again exhort all member states listening to these, really listening to this information and this input to pay heed to these really very, very compelling pleas and to respond to them in the appropriate manner. Youth Initiative for Development, thank you for, again, highlighting, and this has been highlighted over and over again in the session, meaningful refugee participation. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the audio broke up several times and we were not really able to give justice to I know the important amount of information that you were trying to communicate with us, but we do take note of really the activities that you are undertaking, including on training and providing practical tools for refugee empowerment. And we would continue to want you to encourage you to continue in that progress. And then last but not least, the International Detention Coalition. Thank you again for highlighting the importance of alternatives to detention. We are very glad that you also highlighted some of the positive examples, notably Colombia sharing its lessons, the good practices of alternative detentions with refugee hosting countries in Africa, Thailand, certainly loosening its laws in relation to juvenile detention, and other positive examples as well. Believe me, they are extremely welcome in this somewhat restrictive refugee protection climate that we are all unfortunately painfully familiar with. So thank you very much for all of your interventions. On that note, I would like, with your permission, Ambassador, to conclude this meeting and to again thank you very much for your very active engagement. Thank you very much. This meeting is closed.